He is a returning guest to this podcast and a good friend, I dare say, of this podcast. You're in for a good time today because today we are going to discuss History Channel and how not to record history. And I guess none of us will be working for a History Channel anytime soon after this. So, what is it about History Channel that made them so famous, and how everyone heard of the ancient aliens, finding Hitler, shows like Finding Hitler, and etc.? What is it about this channel that's just kind of attractive, but you still want to watch it for memes? But what is it about them?
There was not too long ago a documentary on the a channel, a documentary and a documentary uh, on the History Channel going back into the 90s when it started up as a little more of a what it was, actual, some places. Remember cable, when cable started, it's like TV when it first started. You're trying to find programs everywhere. All of a sudden, you've got 24 hours a day to fill in programs. And you find the niches. So history's a wonderful niche. And and I think they, when it between its whoever managed History Channel, whatever cable network, it would evolve when it would go through those buyouts, and whoever was the CEO and their interests would show up. You remember when goodness, reality TV first came in?
Yeah.
Um, I think all TV took a dive at that moment. I think everything kind of, I think a great rot seemed to occur within the airwaves
Yeah.
suddenly as reality, not reality TV came in. And it became kind of a voyeuristic experience where they kind of watch these people, and that, though it's not scripted, it's planned. This is not really, they're not really out in the wilderness, hanging out. And even PBS, public broadcasting, played it, that they had Pilgrim House, and they had, reality TV like that. And it's awful, because the historian looks at that and you go, oh dear me, you cannot go back in time because you're not there. You don't have the mindset. You know, you might be, you might be able to play Pilgrim and cut wood and farm and process food, learn to do that, but you are never going to be a pilgrim. You do not have those mindsets. You are not the religious nature that they had. You have not the baggage they had. So stop. It's pretty kind of it's very frustrating. The History Channel kind of personified that shift from um, documentaries. So they're trying to either they would replay old documentaries, which are nice. They're pretty good. Um, as well as making some new ones, getting some money to actually develop some new ones that would be popular themes.
So, what would be the biggest difference between the History Channel and National Geographic Channel?
Ah, well, somebody asked me about subscribing to magazines, and they're all popular magazines. I said, to me, Smithsonian and National Geographic are pops magazines. Okay, that I consider that's as low as I'll go. I don't even bother with Star. You don't even think about that. Toss that out. Um, and I think what it is, there is a range of what is history, and we'll start out with academic history. Okay, this is stuff and traditionally it's a little unfair. Sometimes it is fair that history departments would be very isolated, insular, and they would do research for 12 people.
Yeah.
There are themes in the classics or in American history, any others, where they're because as a doctorate student, you're having to do something that is new. That's kind of one of the flaws. It has to be completely new, never done before. Well, for example, when I got assigned Lincoln, I almost cried. I said, "Oh dear Lord, you have no idea what you're asking me."
Mm.
How you can do it. And so you go with some ever narrower fields that are so utterly specialized as to attract no interest at all, or to be so particular that it's hard to relate to anything else. So academic history had a problem, particularly even back decades ago. But next to that, when you have what's called public history, and this is And it's a wide range of histories there. It could be like a Dr. Joanne Friedman or Dr. Heather Cox Richardson, who are going on podcasts and doing talks, very casual talks, using history as a way of engaging people on politics or social changes. What is the historical background behind immigration reform? What is the background behind, so that's a type of public history. It's not meant for the scholars. It's meant for others. It's meant for the person who's just interested in the news, and here's this historian acting as a reporter.
Yeah.
Then you could also become, it's more than maybe the patriotic history or the celebratory history, maybe a little more of that line. But once you pass public history, you get down into heritage. Heritage is a very emotional past, and it's my personal past. It's how I want to remember either my state, my country, my family. It's very personal. My heritage kind of it's that aspect. So it gets from public to popular, very popular, and then all the way down to propaganda, which means this is basically um, uh, it's produced to get to direct you to think a certain way.
Yeah.
It may or may not, in fact, it's likely not to be accurate. In fact, it's probably going to be inaccurate, but only accurate enough so you can't spot the inaccuracies. Lost cause histories are like this. I cringe when I really don't like the iconoclasm we see in our country with all the statues coming down. I don't like that because the historians have said once you start this, you can't stop it. It means you'll never, you kind of throw off all statues at one time. It's like the late Roman, the Byzantine iconoclasm, you destroy all the icons. You go overboard. No one ever measures this out very well. That's kind of the nature of humanity. We get on a move, we get on a kick, and we can't pull it back. We're just going to blow it up. History Channel, I remember that's my personal history here. So this is my personal heritage on History Channel. Used to rarely did I have TV, but
Yeah, I want to ask you about that before you continue, because how did it begin? Did it begin like conspiracy theorists?
No, well, it had documentaries, but remember what's popular. And in the 90s, people would do broad. In fact, I was on their survey list back around 2006 and 8. They surveyed me regularly, so I got an idea what they're looking for. But I think what they're after, they were having a documentary station, something that would dedicate to documentaries, and that would also be a producer for news. But documentaries have one drawback: they're popular history. Not so much public, because they're not really part of a nonprofit group. The museum's not doing it, so they don't really have a target. So they got to make it very popular. Like I talked years ago or months ago, I talked about Dime Museum. This has to make a money, so it's got to be topics that people are going to click on or they're going to turn to. And when we got to the 90s, the World War II vets are now old. Right? They were getting old, and their kids.
They needed an update.
You needed an update, and so you have a lot of people at the very end doing oral histories. Finally, we kind of missed the boat in World War I, but they were determined that all these men and women who had served in the various types of services in the Second World War are going to be heard. And of course, Nazism has been a popular, to use a modern term, clickbait, long before there was a clickbait. Long ago, because it was in our popular memory. My mother's age, remember the propaganda coming out of the 40s on the Nazi machines, the Japanese. It is more the Nazism is more popular as far as a popular history than the Pacific Theater for some reason. I'm not sure why. Because I love the Pacific Theater. That's like if I was in World War II, that's the theater we were looking into. PT boats and whatnot. I love that. However, I think the History Channel was seeking just for that. They were eager to pick up on that market. And was this when they were being bought and rearranged, the CEO changed. At the same time, you see this movement toward oh goodness, I'm gonna get reality TV. Excuse me here. This takes off, and you have all these takes on reality TV, not just Lost. Remember that one. Other types like this, or Big Brother. Big Brother was that was one of the early ones. Vote you out of the house, or vote you off the island. So you have all these very, and I think I'm going, well, that's just bizarre. And then around 2006 is when I really noticed the shift. Now, again, popular history, because people who like history, often guys my age, and frankly, we're not, like my dad and others, we're not that well educated, did not take a lot of history. They like history.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because,
And I suppose the internet wasn't as huge as it is now. I mean,
no,
so
well, the
many
internet
sources that you
yeah,
have.
the internet is real. This is very fast. I mean, my first job where I had to use a computer at all, PC, was in 1992. Before that, I didn't even have access to a PC on my desk. And that's not that long ago in the big scheme of things. At least for somebody my age, it's not that long ago. You are gonna, and each so all of a sudden our generations are in 10-year increments.
Yeah.
We're literally looking at 10-year gaps, and all of a sudden somebody 10 years younger than you is a whole other generation. My granddaughter Edie is almost 5, and she is a digital native. She can flick a touch screen with the best of them.
Yeah.
She could do it since she was 2.5, 3 years old. She could do it. My wife still can't do it. Don't tell her I said that.
We weren't allowed to phone. We weren't allowed to phone until we were like,
yeah.
We weren't allowed to phone until we were like 9 or 10 back in the day.
Yeah, and yes, you don't have that. So anyway, History Channel, going back to that theme, they're still trying to have popular pieces and people to tune in. So the themes would be what if you look at what sells in the bookstores when there were still books often, not World War II, military history is always big, the guys. Elements of the classics, the Spartans are big. That's always been a popular theme. The Roman legions, what sticks in your mind? You think of the ancient world. I think of Greeks. I think of Romans.
Yeah.
I think of Sparta. If they know it all, that's the pickup. Or they pick up on the Iliad and the Odyssey. So you might see these pieces. You might also have replays of a lot of older movies that played with those things. And so like any other broadcast, they're playing with ideas that might work. And when I did a survey, they reminded me of a boss I had, or a supervisor I had years ago at a museum. It was a big culture. It was not a real museum. It was, but it was not. Okay, the museum was really a gigantic shopping center, with many buildings and places in it. It had tours in old buildings, but that didn't mean anything. It was the shopping and the dining that they were after. And my boss, he commented, I was a VP, he was the president, and the comment he made, and I don't want to give it away, but he looked at somebody says, "Oh, that is so boring. That is so utterly boring. Let's do," and he would say something else completely and utterly off the wall. I go, "Are you drunk?" Which didn't set me in well with him at all. And I guess I got a little more blunt, says, "You're playing it." Of course, he could look at my face and knew I was saying, "You're an idiot." My face said it all. I can never play poker. He knew. I said, "No, that's And I think when I looked at the History Channel surveys, it was kind of like that they saw if there wasn't something sensational. And I think what happens with a lot of other newscasts, the same thing. You look at magazines and journalism as a whole went this way because it becomes so commodified, so quickly commercial, or where ideas of commercial does it turn over a profit last week? I mean, I want it immediately, not sooner. And so they're looking for themes that will grab your attention, and magazines like the Star or the tabloids, for example, would hit absurd things, just stupid off the wall things you fly out. And I think that's what's happened in all journalism. So you don't have that many actual journalists who become good at politics. They become good at banking. They become good at they can't really investigate a bank fraud or an investment scam because they really don't know how that works. They're not
Yeah.
that deep into it. Same way with politics. Journalists try to become good at politics, but they don't have certainly don't have a history background for the context. And so we're seeing that these folks, and they could be good, I suppose, if they actually had the time to develop those skills and specialize in it. That's why your sports broadcasters were sports celebrities or have been in sports themselves. They knew what was going on in the locker room after that really bad play. They would kind of know these things. So History Channel kind of leaves, along with the rest of journalism, I think leaves specializers or specialists behind, and kind of goes for the eye candy. What is going to get the interest fast? And once you cross the line, and like I told my students when you talk about museums or commercializing museums, it's you don't know where the line really is sometimes. You kind of, because you're especially in America, you have to make some profit. You cannot just break even. You have to get above breaking even, or you're going to collapse. You'll be eaten. So you really work toward that. But the line comes up. But if we did this, if we did 6 more weddings a month, at our historic site, we'll says, yeah, but you will kill your curatorial staff. Your gardening people will shoot you, or you're going to wreck these historic gardens. I know some sites that did that too. There are all sorts of things that you have to be careful of. You have to consider how far do you want to go with this. And many people don't want to, take that time to evaluate. All right, I need to make a profit, but is this going to violate who we're supposed to be? We've advertised it's been decades. Historians were, jokingly want to sue History Channel for false advertising because it's and I think what really started hitting even before reality TV, although maybe at the same time, was the ancient aliens.
Yeah. And of course we're going to talk about that eventually.
And I think that one just rattled people up. But that's not just History Channel. I'll go back further. I don't know if you remember Sun Pictures.
No.
They were producers in back in the 70s. They were awful. They were ghastly. And what they did Noah's Ark one. I remember that back years ago. But they also did a Lincoln one. Now, my own museum, we saved video clips from it, and we had the book from it, and we panned that thing regularly because it was awful. They did this Lincoln picture, and it's all based on conspiracies. Now, in the 70s, this is still, you're 40 plus years behind, back to now, but Lincoln assassination was a well-known commodity. There have been some good scholars in the earlier 20th century who did phenomenal work on the assassination issues. There is no doubt, yes, it is Booth, yes, it is him, he did it here with this, the game of clue is not necessary. We know he did it in the box.
It's not like the JFK assassination.
Yeah. There isn't one. JFK is more fun because one, it's more recent. There is more of a mystery because there is so much going on during the Cold War.
Yeah.
And Kennedy is a very colorful character, in that he is not an honest man. He is, he has all sorts of skeletons in his closet. No matter what you like the age of policies or not, there are problematic pieces with Kennedy. So you kind of wonder, all right, how much was behind this one? And there was a teacher who was a friend of mine, taught high school actually, yes, but he would do 2 different days on Kennedy.
Yeah.
And he would one day teach straight from the Warren Report and kind of do a straight line piece. Then he would dip over to sometimes conspiracy, because he wanted to expose them to conspiracies, but also some of the other more the darker sides of what was going on in the Cold War. And it got the students to realize that there's confusion and complexity in this. It is not, and that's the only message he's trying to get across to his students, young students. And I admired him for this, if nothing else, was that you really needed to know that history is tremendously complex. That our age is no more complex than that time period for them. And I think what when the History Channel and a lot of documentaries, simple ones would do, is you would get this feeling that this was simple and resolved. So one of the problems with even the format sometimes, I think, is that you would think that, well, this is over. That, it's a hard, tragic ending, but it's over. Well, it never really ends. The Titanic, for example, the movie, the documentaries, there were a long time where that was in the minds of many people when they traveled. It was in the minds of many people when they designed the ships. It was in the minds of many people who were in insurance companies, who were insuring those ships. So there was a lot of issues on top of that, policy issues, people writing about it. It's not just one simple thing. So you get into more complex events like World War II. That's the popular piece. It's a horribly complex mess. You don't get yourself into that kind of mess without a lot of time and people involved in it.
Yeah.
And there are multiple sides. Yes, I am very pro-American in that particular war because I think America did play a tremendously valuable part. Although I like the British joke, late to the party again. Always late to the party. I love that. I have family still over there. There's such a wonderfully dry sense of humor that I thoroughly enjoy. You're late to the party again, aren't you, Yankee? I'm glad you got here.
Yeah.
But I think it's a complex piece. Okay, what was our fault? I mean, no one's innocent. There were policies going back 30, 40, 50 years before this. Very clearly, the Treaty of Versailles is involved in the start of World War II. And I think those kind of shows would have been hard for History Channel to sell because it's how do you tell that kind of narrative and be dynamic about it?
Yeah.
So History Channel, and I don't want to fold them too much, although I do, is that it's really hard to tell a nuanced tale. No one wants to hear, the six sides to an event. You kind of have to, you have to squeeze it down in time, and you got to make the voices scream at you a little more. There was when the Lincoln Museum in Springfield opened up, they had a neat video, which I liked. Others didn't. I liked it. It portrayed the 1860 election as if it was by CNN. And it was broadcasting with it. They had the election returns throughout the night. It was really funny, but it started out it's like a normal broadcast when they got regular broadcasters to do the work. And then somebody else did one.
That.
Yeah, somebody else did one on the election. This is also YouTube, but now you love YouTube like I do. The election of 1800, and it starts off with former President Obama regretting the harshness of campaigns in that age, his age. And then it said, well, let me show you a really nasty campaign. And then it goes again, like a live broadcast of what Jefferson and Adams people said about their rivals. And you realize, oh, these guys are really out for blood and they're lying through their teeth. I mean, it's phenomenal. But you have to have drama. It's like, again, I go back to my museum origins in storytelling. And most historians were not that good at storytelling. I mean, we're taught, if you started out young enough and you're perverted forever afterwards into the academic model, you may never be able to tell a decent story in your life. You have to be able to tell a fun story, which means I've got to condense down a lot of the points. I've got to tighten it up,
adjust the story a little bit as well.
What's that?
Maybe just adjust the story a
Adjust,
little
I
bit.
mean, the adjustments, because that's the interpretation, because I have to make it understandable to that group. I mean, I have to be careful to, if there is a joke that Lincoln tells, I've got to set it up, but I need to do it quickly. I don't have a lot of time to realize people, just to interpret Lincoln's joke. It's the worst thing in the world to explain a joke. You've lost the joke, it's got to be explained. So it needs setup, like a famous Jack Benny work. You have to, somehow get the context, and then hit him with the punchline. It's really, it's an art, and this is where history has to have a really dynamic art, storytelling art. History Channel took the cheap way out, like most. I mean, what was it? I can't remember who. You asked me this. I can't remember who it was. But Hollywood, to use our own movie world, does not deliberately go out of its way to make classics. Classics are made strictly by accident.
Yeah.
They're making a profit. They want a movie to make a profit now. They're not after great art. That's the Sundance movie film, the film festival for that. That you want that to be good for that one. Once in a while, you get, oh my goodness, like I love Brother Where Art Thou.
Mm.
I love that one.
Fantastic movie.
Yeah, it was great. I'm not sure if they knew that it was going to be good. I think it got past some people who normally would not. It worked.
I'm not sure how many people understood the Robert Johnson reference either.
Maybe not. Yeah. Well, I'll pick it up. It was afterwards when somebody mentioned it. Oh crap! Why didn't I see that then? I watched it over. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
It was just, and that makes a movie fun. And a lot of people don't have classics down there yet, or Shakespeare. Those are famous people to spoof on. Both the Odyssey, the Iliad, and Shakespeare are all fair game for great movies, because you're playing with the themes.
Yeah.
You don't do it. You just play with the themes. You kind of toy with the theme. Good. That's good storytelling. History is kind of like it, and I wouldn't mind playing with that one. Doing drama is always helpful, but getting nuance is tough though. That one is a very tough. I think if you could almost just help them grasp it's there, that there's actually layers beyond this. Um, it's not a simple one simple story, and that history is never just telling one thing after another. It's one fact after another. No, it's not. Chronology is not our only issue. You look at contingency. We look at what things impact other things. We're looking at the causation. What are some of the causes and levels of causation? The complexity of this. All these things have to be, brought into play here, because you'll miss what's going on. You'll settle for a simple answer when you really need to be going deeper. And I think when you catch that, then even the chaos we see in our age may not seem quite so endless. You realize at some point maybe it's going to be held. Although there's also the fear that, at other times it wasn't, and things really went south bad really quick.
So where does History Channel take off? Like, how does it become massive popular? Is it because of Ancient Aliens, or was it popular before?
No, I think the shows that hit, and I know Ancient Aliens is kind of fun with a certain luster. I don't know why you would watch it. People I know who watch it like watching spooky things. My youngest daughter and I love watching really awful, cheesy movies. Movies we know are horrible.
Yeah.
Like the old Mystery Science Theater 3000. We love watching the worse the better. Santa Claus versus Satan. We just love those kind of really ghastly, awful movies you cannot believe were ever made and somehow survived, to this day. And I think Ancient Aliens falls in line with that one. But there are a lot of folks, some of my family included, who shall remain nameless, who believe in the conspiracies of all sorts. There's something beyond their control. And I think that's a human fear. Americans, though, are particularly vulnerable, more than I think Europeans or Asians, to this. Somehow within our culture, we have a widespread instinct to believe that there is something deep and dark planning and plotting against us. That there is somebody out there intending us harm. Now, like my sister-in-law said, just because someone is indeed trying to kill you does not mean you're not paranoid. You might still be paranoid, but you have reason. But the two are unrelated.
Yeah.
We might have conspiracies against us, but that doesn't excuse us from being paranoid. So I think that is something within American culture. That is, I don't know so much if Europeans have it. It tends to show up in a very right-wing environment, but I think left-wings are also vulnerable. When you're at the ends, when you're at the wings of the political spectrum, I think both the wings would tend to be vulnerable toward conspiracy messages. I think it just makes you more likely to suck in a line like that. But I think what got them going is things like pawnbrokers, pickers, because I even end up watching those. Because I was having to travel on my last museum job a lot, and so I was in the hotels, and that was my go-to. But then I realized I'm getting so sick of this pawn stuff, really, because I watch people bring in artifacts. I go, no, you idiot. And I realized, why am I watching this? I remember one time I got so bored I watched C-SPAN, Senate debates. But so I think it is when I don't know if people like the Ice Road Truckers and the others or Deadliest Catch, but when I was being surveyed, that's what was coming out. They said, what do you think of these? And I was gave this as this just stunk. I hated this thing. And why? Give me ratings, and I would spend 20 minutes on this survey at least. And it was awful. They finally stopped asking me. I think, because the historians just had no interest. It didn't touch anything that I was interested in. It's like, I was interested in history. I like public history. I like a wide range of things. I'm very curious on a wide range of it. I love elements of ancient history. And I particularly love medieval Europe, early medieval Europe. I love the study of, in fact, I even took a whole great courses series on Arthur. In fact, I think two, dealing with a linguist historian, dealing with, the translations long before Mallory and long before the others of Arthur, or references to an Arthurian figure. Looking back into the 6th century, 7th centuries, they're going back that far, the text itself. And so they're looking back further that, okay, where does this, so those fascinate me because they're wrestling with a complex historical question. But they were very academic. But even the less academic ones, I love Ken Burns' Civil War. It has got some glaring errors in it, glaring problems with it. It is too much based on killer angels, like Gettysburg. It was the movie Gettysburg, and you have too much of the sentimentality. You have too many of the lost causers on that one, which I have problems with. But it was a well done, balanced document. Overall for the time, but not bad. But that's an expensive piece, and you've got to know it's going to come across. Gettysburg was done. I think they were taking a risk. They had, top list actors and things to kind of get it through. History Channel did not go that way. They said, I think because of the management at that time and currently, it was basically, we need this other type of format. So the reality TV format would take over. And I kept thinking, as a manager, how would you change that once you've already gone down that road? How would you change that?
Yeah.
The fact that you would ask me about History Channel, meaning History Channel already has a long and deep reputation. It's everybody knows it's not history.
Yeah.
There's almost no history attached to it. It's just not there. So when their managers, if they ever did shift again, and they said, well, look, we need one stage. No, wait, it's too late now. It's too late. There are others that are doing that, that are taking that over. Now, I think when I did submit a History Channel, another thing about it, Modern Marvels was one of the big ones that they had in the earlier 2000s, and that one was one of the popular go-to shows in the Modern Marvels series. That one was big. That one was big. That's a type of storytelling, but a storytelling on a real type thing that your engineers would like. The thing geek people. I love things, so I gravitated to that one because it dealt with objects,
Yeah.
and objects are kind of fun, and that would have been good. But they did not stick with formats like that. But again, they're having to fill in 24 hours, 7 days a week, and I think they just found out that ice road truckers watching people come into a pawn shop and try and sell old glassware, for $12,000. you People love to be embarrassed. I guess I don't know why. I think that was been our joy to watch other people embarrass themselves. It's not us.
Yeah.
Being grateful, it's not us. In that one.
So I want to talk a little bit about this. Sorry about that. How they mislead history as well, not
Okay.
just with the conspiracy, but in general, how they mislead history.
What kind of misleading are you thinking of?
Like
Yeah.
Finding Hitler, for example, which
okay.
is a show you've
Right,
probably
okay.
seen it where
That's
they
right.
suppose
He's not there.
that
Yeah.
he escaped and he gone off to first of to Spain, crawled through a tunnel,
Yeah. Okay. I know which one.
and escaped to South America. So how does history, like
Yeah.
shows with Finding Hit, reality shows like
Right.
Finding Hitler,
Yeah.
mislead you with history?
All right. And what it does is that they kind of follows a format. They feels a little like reality TV. So they show snippets of people reenacting these particular events as they've seen them. This is the same format back in the 70s that Sun Pictures used in doing its ghastly stuff. And it's the same exact thing where they would take a conspiracy. Lincoln was actually shot by somebody else besides John Wilkes Booth, and he was paid for. That Edwin Stanton actually paid for the assassination of Lincoln, and that a person was murdered to fill in for Booth. So it was a murder. So they would fill in all this in that Lincoln was murdered by the government. The radical Republicans killed him. Some say I think I got a whole series of articles on the Catholics killed him. How they got that. And that one was a real stretch. This follows the same line of the conspiracy theories, and it's because there is no ethic. There is nothing in the producers bailiwick within that broadcasting system. There is nothing there. There is no authority that says, but this is not true. You see, what happens between history, heritage, and popular history is that with history and even with public history, quite often there is somebody, a specialist or a couple of specialists, who are going to use the word nowadays fact check, or they're going to say you're going to have to defend this one better than this one. There's a critique. I can't write whatever I want to write, even though it might be popular on Lincoln or anyone else, without fellow scholars who are going to chime in and call me all sorts of nasty names, and they're going to challenge me, but good. Even if I'm right, they're going to challenge me. That's the nature of it.
Yeah.
Because I underemphasized with that on a particular fine point here. So what they have is, and this is what I had with the museum, again, which shall remain nameless, is that there was I was the expert, but I was not in charge, not of the whole project. So things would go out over my head, that were completely squirrely. I had no, way of changing that. And I think with the History Channel, there is nobody there. There is no voice there that
Nobody
would
to
say,
challenge you when.
no one to challenge. See, the whole purpose of history is that there is a check. There's a counterpoint. Now, it can go too far because there are no materials that there's not much counterpoint to. I mean, there are facts which we do know, for things that happen. If you're going to change it, you really need an abundance of very solid material. Then, and even that material is going to get drilled. For example, if you're going to really change the Kennedy report, the Warren report, you really have to have a trail that shows who actually did shoot Kennedy, or that Oswald was paid by the Cuban. You got to show something a little more tangible. He has to be a lot clearer.
Can't you say he was a communist, therefore he did it?
Yeah. There's just too much. Yeah, you've got correlation without causation, and that's a lot of what we look at. We have correlation without causation. Like in a legal case, you have to have causation. Not that you were in the room, but you had the gun in the room, and your fingerprints around the trick, a little more, something a little more, more substantial. And within the Hollywood, within any movie system, video making system, even that does documentaries, unless the documentary has an overarching control. I did one, I helped produce one, trying to back in Tennessee, and we had like 4 professors, on our group, and the scripts were actually reviewed by all of us. So we look at the materials, and the producer himself, the ones that they actually put do the filming, the director was actually very keen on this himself. So he had a lot of background, for example, in the Civil War. So he knew that the men wearing Civil War uniforms would not be my age. None of them, they're not going to have white hair, and they're not going to be chubby. Okay.
Yeah.
They're going to be very skinny by our standards. And so he was insisting on young, thin guys doing this. There was no 300-pound portly Confederate soldier allowed, in this movie.
Yeah.
That'd be a politician, So he was looking at those fine details, and then all of us, we were all putting the chimes and saying, okay, politically, what is the what is the position here? What is we're looking in the context. So we were all the checks, but you see, this was being funded with money that insisted, people who funded this insisted on expertise backing it up.
Yeah.
When you have Hollywood, there is no expertise backing it up that they have to comply with. They might call on somebody. I might say, Tom, come on over here and take a look at this. But they might completely ignore me too. This has happened a number of times in a lot of big events where I'm trying they're trying to tell a dynamic story, and perhaps the historians they told it are not that dynamic, but they think they have enough. But the thing is, they need to take more time to absorb this material. The historians trying to show it is not that simple, and yet usually when the problems have is because they're trying to simplify a tremendously complex narrative. And you have to at least leave the sense that there is something very complex going on here. Don't leave the people thinking, I got it all. They need to say, I need to dig into this deeper. I need to look into the Cuban Revolution. I need to look into the history of the mob. Or I need to look into Marilyn Monroe. I need to look into, continue on with this here. And then you start, once you're there, you're not even ready to look into the Freedom of Information Act to know what documents do you need to try and force open. And then you're into a whole other, work there. So, this is a fascinating bit of work. This is kind of neat. But to do that, you've got to have funding that is regulated, that there's somebody who said, thou shalt make a historic, and most people say, I want a historically accurate drama of the Alamo. And say that's a big thing right now in Texas. It's not what they really want. What they want is an updating of the John Wayne film. That's what they want, with better costumes. They don't want to know the complexities of what were you doing in Mexico. This is Mexico. No, this is not the United States. Texas is Mexico. And those are complex stories to tell. Those are very complex stories to tell. And they don't go over it as well. And the History Channel can't tell it. They have, you try and come up with ways of telling these dynamic, exciting pieces. But like I said, it could be because it's, I think when you ask that question about why, I think Nazis, this conspiracy that satisfies the desire, that emotional curiosity to have something for the past, to understand the past. That's a natural curiosity. And I think that it's too much work to actually grab at what's real. It's easier to believe a dynamic story told with pictures and drama, and a lot of mystery than it is to actually work at thinking through, okay, I always thought this, but now maybe this is the case, or perhaps these other two are the case at the same time. That's our laziness. We're just simply not wired to do that.
Do you think they believe it themselves, or do you think they know they're just selling bullshit?
Wow. Oh, I think most producers know it's crap, but they don't even care. I think there's a tremendous amount of people, as my sister-in-law, when she was doing counseling, they'll say anything. Just say anything. They don't mind lying or not lying. It's all the same to them.
Yeah.
We've had some politicians like this lately. Just say whatever comes to their little minds. And they're not interested in truth for truth's sake. So that there's actually a conscience behind the work they're doing. It's one thing, like I said, to promote. I can kind of respect the Lost Cause Confederacy because these guys actually believe this silly thing. They're firmly enmeshed in it. It's wrong, and I think I can document it pretty well. It's wrong, but they're enmeshed, and they really do believe this. It's not something that they made up. They're duped, I think, willingly perhaps, but they're not conscious that it's a complete fabrication. They're and this is something for the danger. I know a lot of historians. It's probably to be an activist, political activist, and I know a lot of our colleagues of mine are activists, and it's right to do so, but it's difficult to remain somewhat objective of your own position and see the glaring or see some problems with our own fault.
Yeah.
And again, to tell a true story, I've got to see fault with myself, or the side I always like. Now, if you talk about ancient aliens, I guess it doesn't matter. You're outside the zone of reality. It's there's no deep thinking involved, no particular need to wrestle with what you always thought turned out to be wrong. When you get into World War II, if you just glamorize some things, or if you say Hitler was not there or escaped, you say, darn that, got wonder how many play that some more, like Elvis lives, and we had that group too. So
we know briefly how you feel about History Channel, but what do you think other historians, how do you think they feel about History Channel? Do they hate it as much as you do?
They will say things that are not family friendly. Oh,
not bad.
Some of them really go ballistic. Yeah, you get some of them when they're particularly if it's their subject, nothing really. Oh gosh, and I'm as bad. Nothing rattles the specialist in an area than to screw up their favorite topics. Nothing will set them off anymore. And oh gosh, yeah. And Lincoln, that's why, yes, that's why the certain fights like with Lincoln get really hostile because they're they have lifelong studies in this one. You know, they'll fight over subtle word choices, let alone content. Um, like I think I was thinking, Gelso, no, not Gelso. Oh goodness, I'm just blank here. But one historian in a recent podcast talked about Lincoln had never changed. He did not shift positions. He was always anti-slave. You know, he kind of overplayed the piece. And
Yeah.
I've read enough Lincoln's diary, not diary, but his letters, his notes, and his commentaries about him, and enough context. And no one doesn't never change. And I think example, look at Ron White's study of Lincoln, where he sees this continual growth or change in language to more and more of a religious language, and there's something going on in his head at that point. You realize, okay, somebody is changing. It's a change
Yeah.
that um, that is hard for people to grasp. And further back you go, it's harder it gets.
I just want to add that if you want to check out our episode on Lincoln, Thomas Mackie was
There you go. Yeah.
was way back in the early days of this podcast talking about Lincoln in episode 14. So make sure you check that out after this episode.
Yeah. So but there are but every character has those moments. Oh goodness. Oh yeah. Well, originalists, people who talk about original Constitution, it's as trying to read it as the founders said. Well, there are a whole bunch of scholars, some I know personally, who just go off the wall on this one because they know these guys. I mean, they've read, they've helped publish their papers. Some scholars have actually worked with the founders' papers live, editing, manuscripts from Hamilton or from Washington and from Jefferson and many others. And I realized these guys they were not a unified thinking. They were not a unified, cohesive bunch. They're many are brilliant. Some are drunken. Some are scoundrels. But still, brilliant scoundrels are scoundrels. But you have this mixed bag that doesn't know where this is going to go. They do not know where this is going to go. And you do the best you can, and another generation has to take it on. So when somebody says, well, we have a strict construction, how does this go by? And all the early Americans say, go stop. We know where this is going. You're out of line here. It tends to be a legal way of thinking. The historians I know, especially early Americans, will say no. They would never say that because they know too much about the context of these characters and that they are not that tidy is coming up with an original intent. They had, they deliberately left things vague so it was going to evolve. That was just going to happen. They're used to that. They understood that. They're all lawyers. They also understood that each generation has got to interpret and beat this together. And they just kick certain issues down the road further. Someone else got to deal with that one. Historian Barbara Fields years ago in the Ken Burns special, she's the one who said that she refers to the word kick the can with slavery. That was an issue. They kicked that can down the road. They could not deal with it then. There was no way they could hold it together and deal with slavery. It just they couldn't, one way or the other. They could not make it official. They couldn't make it unofficial. They couldn't do anything. They had to just basically leave it alone.
Yep.
And let it evolve some way.
Thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure to have you back. You're always welcome back to this podcast.
Getting late here.
And do you have anything you will wish to promote before you go? Any social media where people can find you?
My job right now is getting my book, Shrines and Circuses, the manuscript finished, edited, so it's back to the publisher. This is getting a Civil War class, but I'm looking so much forward to face-to-face classes. I find it so much easier if I can verbally walk through my material than
Yeah.
have to structure everything and hope they read it the same way I wrote it, kind of thing. Because I
Yeah.
can't see their eyeballs glaze over. You go, what? Or go, why? Go, let me repeat this differently.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh,
My
listen,
name is
glad
my name is Alan, and this has been Well That Aged Well. We are available on Instagram under Well That Aged Well. We are on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can find podcasts. If you like this episode, check out some of the previous episodes, and I will recommend checking out both of the previous episodes that Thomas Mackie was in. And my name is Alan, and I'll see you next time.